In case of a split off, a new company is created in order to take over the operation of an existing division or a unit of a company. So you are entirely creating a new company to take over the operation of the existing division or a unit. Now, a portion of existing shareholders of the company obtains stock in the subsidiary or a new company in exchange of the stock of the parent company. As a result, the equity base of parent company is reduced, representing downsizing of the firm. And thus, the shareholding of new entity does not imply the shareholding of the parent entity. So you exchange your share of parent holding with the new company holding. So the parent holding will reduce and you will become the shareholder of the new entity. So this is an example of a split off. So Synchrony Financial was actually an entity which was owned by General Electronic. On November 17, 2015, Synchrony Financial was a wholly owned subsidiary of General Electronic. But then CEO Jeffrey Immelt decided to separate its financial business from its core industrial business. So it was split off. There was a new company created and it was transferred. So that is called a split off. So spin off and split off, both are the ways of making either the separate division independent or creating a new company to take charge of one of the divisions. Under both, a new division is separated from the existing company. Then the third is divestitures. Divestitures is very simple. It's basically trying to sell a portion of your business or a subsidiary to other company. So divestitures is an outright sale of company's subsidiary. Normally sell-offs are done because subsidiary doesn't fit into parent company's core strategy. The market may be undervaluing the combined business due to lack of synergy between parent and subsidiary. As a result, management or board may decide that you need to separate this subsidiary. One of the key examples that I would like to give is basically when government did the privatization of public sector enterprises. So that is also called divestitures. In a divestitures, you are actually trying to sell a subsidiary which is owned by you to some new buyer. The reason could be, number one, that subsidiary is not adding any value. Second, the buyer may be able to create better value than you. Third, you are not able to operate it efficiently, or it is taking too much resources but not giving the returns. Besides getting rid of an unwanted subsidiary, sell-off also raises cash, which can be used to pay off the debt. So if you sell off the subsidiary, the cash generated could be used to pay off the debt and reduce the leverage, which makes your leverage comfortable. In late 90s and early 80s, corporate traders would use the debt to finance the acquisition. Then after making the purchase, they would sell off the subsidiaries to raise cash to service the debt. So this was a strategy adopted by them, that they would acquire a company, right, with the help of finance, so with the help of raising debt. Once they purchase the company, they would sell off its subsidiaries to raise cash and service the debt. The Raiders method certainly makes sense if sum of the parts is greater than the whole. So if all subsidiaries valued together is having a higher value than the parent, then this strategy may work. When it isn't, deals are unsuccessful. So divestitures is basically you are selling a portion of the business or a vertical of business which is not suitable or which is sick or which is not meeting your current value criteria. One of the example is Indian Petrochemical Corporation Limited was actually sold to Reliance Industries by Indian government. So the key examples of all divestitures is the privatization of the government units and selling off to the private parties. So these are called the divestitures. The next is called equity carve-outs. So this is also the strategy to contract your business needs. Now, what is equity carve-out? So equity carve-outs are more and more companies using equity carve-outs to boost the shareholders' value. Now, when you use this equity carve-out is a simple thing. When you have different subsidiaries and one of the subsidiary is growing faster compared to the other businesses. Let's say you have 4 businesses, 4 subsidiaries, and one of the subsidiary is actually growing faster, or it has a fast growth potential or higher growth potential compared to the other subsidiaries, then what you can do is, to unlock the value, you can float an IPO and partially sell off the stake to the outsiders, right? So what is an equity carve out? In equity carve out, a firm makes a subsidiary public. So you have an IPO of that particular subsidiary. You invite the outside shareholders to purchase the stake. You are not selling the entire subsidiary. You still keep the control with you. So it's a partial sell off only. A newly publicly listed company is created, but the parent keeps the controlling stake in the newly traded. A carve out is a strategic avenue a parent firm may take when one of its subsidiary is growing faster and carrying higher valuation than the other businesses owned by the parent. So if you have 4 subsidiaries and if you feel that one of your subsidiary has a higher value which you need to encash by going public, and maybe stock market will reward you, they will give you better valuation, so you actually go for an IPO of that particular business only. The entire firm is not going for an IPO. A business is going for an IPO. Again, you are not entirely selling company to the public. You keep the controlling stake with you, and portion of the shares are floated to general public. A carve out generates cash because the shares in public are sold, but the issue also unlocks the value of the subsidiary unit and enhances the parent's shareholder value. So what happens is that when you go for public, portion of the entity goes for public, you can get a better valuation. And since parents are holding the share, their value of holding will also increase because of the higher value created through an IPO. A new legal entity of a carve-out has a separate board, but in most carve-outs, the parent retains some control. In these cases, some portion of parent's firm board directors may be shared. Since the parent has controlling stake, meaning both firms have common shareholders, the connection between two is likely to be very strong. So in an equity carve out, you are just separating the firm in their financial structuring. The operational restructuring doesn't happen. The board remains same, the controlling stake remains same, and the decision making also remains same. You're just trying to encash the higher value of the market of that subsidiary. That is the reason for an equity carve out. But sometimes it may happen that equity carve out is basically done for the other purposes also. One of the example of equity carve out in India is Indiabulls Limited actually had one of the businesses called commercial office business. So that business was flourishing compared to the other businesses. What they did is they did a carve out of a commercial office business into separate firm under the name of Indiabulls Commercial Assets Limited, and they went for an IPO. Now, what could be the negative side of an equity carve out? So sometimes companies actually misuse this liberty to actually sell off something which is not working well or doing well. So sometimes companies carve out a subsidiary not because it's not doing well, or not because it's doing well, but because it is a burden. Such an intention won't lead to a successful result, especially if a carved out subsidiary is too much loaded with the debt or had trouble even when it was a part of parent and is lacking established track record for growing revenues and profits. So companies do two kinds of carve outs. One is for an healthy operation and one is for a burden. But generally, equity carve outs will create value only if the business is healthy. It has a good revenue prospect and it does not have much of a debt. If you are carving out a business which is too much debt burden, does not have a proven track record of revenue, it may happen that the IPO valuation will not be correct. And instead of creating value, it may end up destroying the value. And second is, carve outs also create unexpected friction between the parent and the subsidiary. Problems can arise as managers of carved out company must be accountable to their public shareholders as well as the owners of the company. This can create divided loyalties. When you are carving out a new company is formed. Their managers gets the autonomy, but still the controlling stake is with the parent. So sometimes there is a friction in the decision making. They may not enjoy the autonomy compared to the other aspects or other set of possibilities. So this is the negative side of equity. So broadly, equity carve-out is basically when you make one of your businesses public, which has a good potential, and you would like to leverage the higher market value. The next is called split ups. Now, what is a split up? So in split up, the entire company is actually broken up into the series of spin-offs. So what you do is you cut the company into different segments and you spin off individual entities. As a result, parent company no longer exists and only the new offspring continue to survive. So let's say there is a parent company. Now you cut that parent company or distribute that parent company into 4 different companies, and each company is spin off separately. So basically a parent company is dissolved and new 4 entities are created. A split up basically involves a creation of new class of stock for each of the parent's operating subsidiary, paying current subsidiaries a dividend of each class of new stock and then dissolving. So A, B, C, D, let's say there are 4 subsidiaries and P is a parent. So all parent shares will be now dissolved and converted into a subsidiary shares. So instead of P, if you are a shareholder of P, now you will become shareholder of either A, B, C, or D. Stockholders in new companies may be different, as shareholders in the parent company may exchange their stock for one or more spin-off. So as a parent company shareholder, you have an option that whether you would like to become the shareholder of A, B, C, or D. So you may accept all 4, or you may accept one of them, or you may accept 2 of them. So depending upon your choice, the shareholding pattern may change. A classic example of split up was restructuring of Andhra Pradesh State Electricity Board. The power generating division and the transmission and distribution division of APSEB was transferred to 2 different companies, namely APGN Company and AP Trana Company, respectively. As a result of such split up, APSEB ceased to exist. So there was a parent company, which was Andhra Pradesh State Electricity Board, and they had 2 business units. One was the power generating division, and second was the transmission division. After restructuring, split ups, the parent ceased to exist, and there were new 2 companies created, one for the transmission and distribution and one from power generating division. So the parent ceased to exist and there are new entities created. That is called a split up. Finally, you have something called a tracking stock. Now, what is a tracking stock? So in tracking stock arrangement, it is a special type of stock issued by publicly held company to track the value of one of the segments of the company. The stock allows different segments of the company to be valued differently by the investors. So basically you create 2 classes of share, class A and class B. Class A is your normal share and class B is your tracking stock, where you actually the stock, the value of the stock will depend upon a particular business unit or a segment of a company. Let's say a slow growth company is trading at a low price to earnings ratio or a PE ratio. Okay, I'll ask you first. What is a PE ratio? What is a price to earnings ratio and what is the significance of it? It's an interview question. What is the price to earnings ratio? How many of you have actually heard this term? You may say yes or no. Have you heard this term? Have you? Yes. Okay. You know what is price to earnings ratio? What is the indication? What is the formula and what is the significance? So can anybody tell me what does a price to earnings ratio indicates and where do you use? So Pooja is saying is current price divided by earnings. So current trading price of a stock divided by earnings per share. It's a ratio of company share price to the company's earnings per share. That's correct. This ratio is generally used for the purpose of valuation. So price to earnings ratio actually indicates that against every dollar or rupee of earning, how many times market is giving you the premium, or how many times market is valuing you compared to your $1 of earning. Let me give you an example. Let's say P ratio of one company is 10 and PE ratio of second company is 20 times. Remember, this ratio is in times. What is the indication? The indication is very simple. For every $1 of earning that company A has, market is valuing it 10 times. So for every $1, market is actually valuing you 10 times. So $10. And for company B, against every $1 of earnings, market is valuing you 20 times, or $20. Now, my question to you is, if you have to select out of these two stocks, which one do you think is better investment? A with 10 times price to earnings ratio, or B which is 20 times price to earnings ratio? Akshay and Akshit, why B? Or whoever is saying B, why B? Well, obviously, the answer is straightforward, that higher P ratio indicates that you are getting more premium and the stock has higher potential to capital appreciation. So obviously, company with a higher P is likely to deliver a better result. So you should select that company for the investment. Okay, so what is a tracking stock? So you create a separate class of stock to track, right? So let's say a slow growth company is trading at a low price to earnings ratio, happens to have a fast growing business unit. So as a company, your price to earnings ratio is very low, but one of the units of your company has a high PE ratio. See, remember, if your company has as a company, you can also have a price to earnings ratio, and as a segment also you have price to earnings ratio. So if your faster growing business unit has a higher potential ratio, the company might issue a tracking stock so that market can value the new business separately from the company. So instead of valuing the company's price to earnings ratio, market may value the segment which is growing very fast. So the market can value new business separately from the old one and significantly give a higher P rating. Now, why would a firm issue a tracking stock rather than spinning off or carving out its fast growth business for the shareholders? Because you can do the spin off also and you can do the carve out also, but still, why do you do the tracking stock? The answer is the company retains control over the subsidiaries. The two business can continue to enjoy the synergies also and share marketing, administrative support function, and headquarter cost. Finally, most importantly, if the tracking stock climbs in value, the parent company can use the track stock that it owns to make an acquisition. Still, shareholders needs to remember that tracking stock is class B. What do you mean by class B? There is something called class A share, which is a normal equity share, and there is something called class B share, which is called tracking stock. Class B share tracking stock means that they don't grant shareholders the same voting right as a main stock. So if you are a principal shareholder or if you are holding stock A, you may have a different voting right. And if you are holding tracking stock, you may have a different voting right. Each share of tracking stock may have only, let's say, a half or a quarter of vote. So for normal share, one share is equal to one vote. For tracking stock, one share equals to a half a vote or a quarter of vote. The reason is very simple. You don't own the entire business. You own the separate segment. So obviously your voting right will also go down. In rare cases, holder of tracking stock will not have any vote at all. So there is possibility that you might not at all have any tracking stock. Okay, now we are already through with two types of choices of restructuring. So let's quickly just look at it. Where do we stand in terms of choices? Expansion, we have discussed what is mergers and acquisition, what is tender offers, what is asset acquisition, what is joint ventures. In contraction also, we have discussed spin-off, split off, divestitures, equity carved out, and split up. So split up we'll discuss at a later stage, but 4 we have already done. Now let's move to the third choice of corporate restructuring. The purpose is to improve the corporate control. So either you as a corporate or promoter would like to improve your control in the functioning by improving your voting right, or you would like to reduce the control of the other segment or a particular group of people. Right now, what could be the objective? So one objective could be anti-takeover defenses, that you are trying to exercise corporate control to avoid any takeover or hostile takeover. Secondly, you can do share repurchase for a better control, so that the other people who are enjoying a higher stake, their shares are with you and you can exercise better control. You can have exchange offer, which is like share repurchase only, but you may have for the debt instrument also. And you have something called a proxy contest. So let's move to what is a corporate control. Corporate control, the purpose is that you would like to exercise a better control on the structure of the company. That is called corporate control. So let's just try and understand what are the options do we have when we talk about corporate control. So corporate control is another method of restructuring which involves obtaining control over the management of the firm. Controlling here is basically defined as a process through which top managers influence other related members of an entity to implement the predetermined organization strategy. So you would like to control the company in such a way that whatever decision you want, you should be able to execute without any hustle. Now, first reason is, why would you like to improve the corporate control is to avoid any takeover. So we had a discussion on a hostile takeover, right? So hostile takeover is when an acquirer approaches the target's shareholders to tender their shares to the company. In a hostile takeover, generally when the target is taken over by an acquirer, they will fire the top management or the managers. Now, in order to avoid that, you need to exercise something called an anti-takeover defense, that you don't want to get taken over by them. You want them to stop. Now, anti-takeover defense will make either the acquisitions expensive. Second, it may make the acquisition costly. It may make the acquisition unattractive, and it may make the acquisition legally impossible. So you may have different options available for you to avoid yourself taking over. Now, what could be the anti-takeover defenses? So it is a technique followed by a company to prevent forcefully acquiring its management. With the high level of hostile takeover activity in recent years, various companies are resorting to the strategy of the anti-takeover defense. Such takeover defenses may be a pre-bid or a preventive defense or a post-bid on active defense, right? So you may have a pre-bid defenses available. You may have a post-bid defenses also available. Pre-bid or preventive defenses are generally employed with the view to prevent a sudden or unexpected hostile bid from obtaining control of the company. So you may have something called a pre-bid possibility. You may have something called a post-bid possibility. So I'll just give you an idea of what kind of strategies you can have. First strategy is called poison pill. We actually discussed poison pill in one of the classes. Can anybody tell me what is a poison pill? Do you remember? I think I had discussed. If you can give the philosophy or understanding. Do you remember we discussed something like this? At least you can say yes or no in that. Strategy used to prevent the takeover, right? How can you prevent the takeover? So there are two things. One is that you try and make yourself expensive to acquire. Second, you may offer the acquirer only and a counter offer. Third, probably you try and reduce the number of shares outstanding so that the other person will not be able to acquire, right? So a lot of possibilities are there that will make you, probably very difficult to acquire, or you may have something called unattractiveness. So I'll just try and give you one example, which is shark repellents. What is shark repellents is basically that you try and change the structure in such a way through board that any takeover attempt can be dissolved, or you change the board, right? Or you make a rule that no other person can join the board for next 3 or 4 years. Then there is second possibility, which is called poison pill. So poison pill, I'll give you a simple example, that you take straight away, you take 80% debt. So you are 100% equity finance company and somebody is trying to acquire you. So in order to have your defense, you increase your debt from 0% to 80%. Now, when an acquirer acquires a company with 80% debt, they have to assume that debt in their balance sheet. So it becomes very unattractive because you are acquiring a company with a huge debt. So it makes it unattractive. What is the problem with the debt? Number one, there is a compulsion to pay interest. Number two, too much debt can lead to a default and you will not be able to create a value. So one form of poison pill is you take too much debt. Second, you buy back the stock from the open market. Somebody is buying out from the open market. An acquirer is also buying out and the target firm is also buying out. So he is trying to have maximum shares. You also offer to your shareholders and buy back. So he has to acquire more. Third, a very destructive tendency, you issue a right share at very low price. So that will create a lot of problem. I'll just give you an example. Let's say you're currently, just look in the chat box, currently the share is trading at 100. And the acquirer offers a tender offer to your shareholders that he is willing to buy the shares at 120. Right? So he's offering $20 premium. If you are a shareholder of this company, what would you do? Would you tender your shares or you will not tender? What do you think? What is the possibility? Currently, the share is trading at 100. An acquirer comes to you and says that please tender your shares to me. I'll pay you 120. In majority of the cases, what would a shareholder do? Would he tender the share or would he refuse the offer? So Urvi is saying tender, Kaushal is saying tender, yes, Kinnar is saying tender, that's correct. Now, it's very easy. Now, this is the offer by a acquirer. Now, you as a company can have one more option. You approach your shareholders and tell them that I am willing to give you additional share, a right share, at let's say $10. What will happen? A right share. You know what is a right share? It gives you a right to purchase a share. It is a right given to an existing shareholder to purchase an additional share. So a company approaches you as a shareholder. Now what will happen? Now there is a problem with you. You want to sell your share at 120, but now company is offering you share at 10. So you are definitely going to buy at 10. You will exercise the right and purchase the shares. Yes or no? Yes. Now, when you purchase shares, what will happen to number of shares outstanding? Increase. When number of shares outstanding increases, the target of the acquirer has to actually purchase more shares. So what will happen is that earlier he was supposed to buy 51% of your share. Now you have issued additional shares, let's say 1 to 1. So what will happen? The number of shares outstanding in the market has gone up by 100%. So he has to again buy 51%. So that will make his acquisition expensive. So this is called anti-takeover hostile, anti-hostile takeover bid. So there are a lot of strategies, but ultimately the purpose is basically to save. There is one very good anti-hostile takeover strategy which is adopted by management, which is called golden parachute. So I'll just explain what is that. You know what is a parachute? What is a parachute? When the plane is crashing, you can just pop out of the plane and you can open the parachute and you will land. Now what happens? Yeah, great. So the idea is very simple. If you are a manager of a company which is acquired forcefully by another company, what will happen to your job? Would they keep your job or would they kick you out? So I'll ask you a question again. Just let me reshape the question. You are a manager of a company. Another company is forcefully trying to acquire your company. So you are not interested, but the other entity is planning to do it. Right? If they are successful and they take over, what will happen to your job? Chances of losing the job, that's correct. Well, it's not a chance. Obviously, they'll kick you out. Definitely, they'll kick you out because you resisted their acquisition. So once they acquire you, the first thing that they are going to do is kick you out. Now, there is a very sweet mechanism available to protect yourself. What is that? That's called a golden parachute. So before they acquire you, you can pass a resolution in the board that when they acquire, you exercise a golden parachute provision. Under golden parachute provision, they can kick you out, but against that, they have to pay you heavy compensation. So let's say you are a top manager and golden parachute tells you that, okay, they can kick you out, but only if they pay you heavy compensation. So if they pay you heavy compensation, then only they can kick you out. Now, because of that, what will happen? That they will be able to kick you out, but against that, you will get a good amount of compensation. And since they have to pay compensation, it will be added in their acquisition price. So with the help of golden parachute, what will happen is the acquirer has to pay you also. It has to pay the company also. It has to pay you also. So acquisition will become expensive. Your job will be lost, but still you will get an advantage in form of compensation. So that is also an anti-takeover mechanism. So let's get back to where we discussing. So anti-takeover defenses. When preventive takeover defenses become unsuccessful in preventing the unwanted bid, the post-bid or active defenses are implemented. So golden parachute is kind of a post-bid. Such takeover defenses attempt at changing the corporate control or position of the promoters. Just to give you an idea, whenever there is a hostile takeover, lot of value is destroyed for the shareholders because the target company managers will also try and resist, and the acquirer will also have an aggressive approach. So in this process, there will be a tussle and ego fight, but it may end up destroying substantial value for the shareholders. So mostly hostile takeovers will either become very expensive, right? Or eventually it will get converted into friendly ones, because fighting for a very long period may destroy value, resources, and ultimately it's loss of the shareholders. So nobody would like to go. So mostly hostile takeover bids will eventually become into a friendly ones, and with the smooth negotiation, they will get executed. Now, this is about anti-takeover defense. The next is share repurchases. So this is also an anti-takeover defense. It's a very simple thing. The target wants to acquire the shares. The target wants to acquire the shares through open market. So he is not approaching you. He is approaching your shareholders directly. Now, instead of shareholders giving their shares to the target, to the acquirer, you take it. So the idea is very simple. Let's say A is the acquirer company and T is the target company and S is the shareholder. So in share purchases, what will happen is that acquirer will move to the target's shareholders and give them a tender offer that you please tender or surrender your shares to me. Now, the same way an acquirer is moving, the target company can also approach the shareholders that instead of giving your shares to the target, please share or please tender your shares to us. So share repurchase is basically repurchasing your own shares by a company from the market. Shares may be purchased by following either a tender offer or through open market. So you give an offer or you outright buy from the market. Shares repurchased, also called the buyback of shares. It will lead to reduction in the equity capital. So when you do a buyback, the balance sheet equity portion will go down. Share buyback helps in strengthening the promoter's controlling position in the company by increasing their percentage of stake in the equity of the company. So I'll just give you a simple example. Let's say there is a company which is 100% equity finance. I'm putting the question in the chat box. Promoters stake is 50% and the other shareholders are also 50%. So both the shareholder groups, the promoters and the other shareholders, they jointly own the company. Now company does a buyback. So obviously promoter is not going to give his share to the company, but company buybacks the 20%. Now can you tell me what would be the new stake? So I'll just give you an idea. When they buy back 20%, the equity from 100%, it will fall to 80%. In 80%, the promoter stake will be 50% and the other shareholder stake will be 30%. So earlier, the promoter stake was 50%. But after the buyback, the promoter stake is 50 divided by 80. Since the buyback has reduced the equity, but promoter's quota or share remained intact. So now the new contribution of the promoter is 62%. Because the number of shares outstanding from general public has been bought back. That is a reduction in the equity. So now instead of 100% equity, it will be 80% equity. Right? So the balance sheet has gone down, but since the balance sheet has gone down, the proportion of outsiders have gone down, not the promoters. So promoter's stake has gone up. Right? So that is how you can exercise the buyback or share buyback. And the last slide for the day is now shares purchased are also called buyback of the share. It will lead to reduction in the equity capital of the company. Shares buyback helps strengthening the promoter's controlling position. This is what we discussed through example. It is also used as a takeover defense to reduce the number of shares that could be purchased by a potential acquirer. So if a potential acquirer is planning to purchase a sizable portion, you can actually reduce it by share repurchase. So I guess that should be all.